Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, the host of the VentureFizz podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 364, and today's guest is John Andrews, co-founder and CEO of Cimulate. There is a wave of entrepreneurs who are uniquely qualified to build a pillar tech company in the Boston tech ecosystem while leveraging the platform shift to AI. Not only is John one of them, but he is also an alum of the very successful crew from Endeca. John and his co-founder, Vivek Farias, are tackling the future of e-commerce, and as you'll hear, their platform is a perfect use case for Gen AI. Their last company, Celect, was a big data predictive analytics platform for the retail industry, which was acquired by Nike. Cimulate recently announced a $28 million Series A round of funding led by Spark Capital with participation from their seed investors, Sierra Ventures and Pillar VC, with additional participation from LFX Venture Partners and Commerce Ventures. In this episode of our podcast, we cover lots of great topics, like a deep dive into the use cases of AI in the retail and e-commerce industry, especially around personalization, John's background story, and getting his career started at Deloitte Consulting and getting an MBA from HBS, how he met Steve Papa, the founder of Endeca, and the full lifecycle story of his experience there, including the acquisition by Oracle and the integration of their tech there, connecting with Vivek Farias and Devarat Shah through Steve Papa and the story of building Celect, which was using AI and machine learning back in 2014, how the acquisition by Nike came together, all the details about Cimulate and how the platform works, plus their growth plans ahead, biggest lessons learned as a multi-time CEO, and so much more. And now, a brief word from our podcast sponsor, Silicon Valley Bank. I'm excited to share that this podcast is brought to you by one of the strongest longtime supporters of the local startup ecosystem, that being Silicon Valley Bank, a division of First Citizens Bank. SVB serves innovative tech, healthcare, and life sciences companies, including 60% of CNBC's Disruptor 50 list, 72% of Forbes Cloud 100 list, and 48% of Forbes AI 50 list companies. With more than 1,500 bankers and relationship advisors and $42 billion in loans through Q2 2024, SVB delivers the right people, service, and resources to support your entire financial journey. Learn more at svb.com. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with John. John, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. Appreciate it. Looking forward to this.
We have so much to talk about. You're one of the reasons why I was looking forward to talking to you is obviously you've got a great background and pedigree of what you've accomplished, but there's this, I feel like it's a wave of next generation founder companies being built that are repeat founders, building really interesting products, largely in AI now, obviously, but the founders that are building again, they're uniquely qualified to build what they're building. So I'm excited to break down what you're working on now with Cimulate. But before we get into that, I did want to talk about AI. I think it's you have so much depth of experience in retail and e-commerce. So what are you seeing out there as it relates to the industry as it pertains to AI, the use cases?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's funny. I've been on a number of panels recently at like retail events, and the question always comes up is the AI hype for real? Like, do you actually buy into the AI hype, or is this kind of the next big thing that's going to kind of fizzle out a little bit? And this might sound ridiculous. I think it's underhyped a little bit in terms of what the potential can be. And I just with the technology, what it's capable of, and then some of the specific use cases that we're seeing, I think it's going to transform a number of different industries, and specifically some very unique use cases. And we can talk more about this, but I think with what we're building right now at Cimulate, the use case around the customer experience and being able to have more of a kind of conversation with the customer and truly being able to personalize at scale and actually get to more of a one-on-one personalization. That's always been the goal. And I often hate the word personalization because it's been overused so much. It's always a promise, and it's been more to either segments or one-to-many. But I do think this technology is going to have a pretty big impact, particularly within the commerce market.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'm excited to see what the future is all about and obviously what you're working on. But before we get into all that, let's rewind the clock and talk about your background. So where did you grow up? What were you like as a kid?
Fun. So I grew up in Providence, North Providence, Rhode Island. I've family of five. I have four older sisters. There's a pretty big gap between me and they were all bang, 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 bang. I think my parents had four girls under the age of five and under at one point. And then 7 years later, little Johnny comes along, as the older boy. Same, not a second marriage or anything, kind of same parents. And I had a great childhood. I have nothing to really complain about. Great parents, great family, great friends. I think when I think about what I've done from a career, and you kind of look at what folks are like as kids. I think my mom always wanted me to be a doctor because she was in the medical field, and that would kind of lead to what I began studying in college. But I always loved early on organizing things and kind of running things. And I think one just kind of fun, little hokey example of that is my family had a paper route. So my sisters they're basically on our street. There were 12 houses that my sisters did for me. You had to be 12 years old to do it. So from age 12 to 14, they did it and handed it down to the next one. And then when the sister closest to me was 14, she's like, I'm done. So at age 7, I took it over. And then I went all in on it. And then by age 14, when I was graduating from 8th grade, going on to high school, it had gone from like 12 or 14 houses to about 200. And I had basically consolidated the entire market in the area. We lived in a street that was, kind of off the main street. And then there were a bunch of dead ends up to Rhode Island College. And we were on one. And then I basically took over all the others. And it was one of these things where I just liked running. I liked the fact that I could, make a little money to buy baseball cards. And yeah, it was, but I think it lends a little bit of insight into kind of, what kind of fires me up and what winds me up.
Well, hearing that story alone, I would have written you a check back then of whatever you're going to start in the future. But no, like that, you know what? I know the newspaper industry is never going to come back, but I wish there would be something that would replicate that experience for kids because
Totally.
like you had to like run a business, you had to be up, deliver, unless it was an afternoon route, and then
Yeah.
you had to go collect your money, right? You had to go door to door and say, hey, like,
I was that kid from Better Off Dead knocking on the door, like with the hoodie, $2 plus tip.
where's my $2?
Yeah, because you had to, right? And it
Right.
taught you to kind of go and do it. And if I was going to be out of town for a couple of days, I had to find a friend to cover for me, and I needed to pay them some rate to do it. Anyway, I totally agree. I think it would be a great experience for a lot of kids today.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay. So you went on to Boston College and studied economics and computer science.
Yeah. I started as biology,
Okay.
which leads to my mom like, you make a great doctor. I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? And I just did not love it, and I took an economics class, I think like micro my freshman year, and I remember at the end of the semester, it's like I really like this, and got an exam back. I'm like, if I do well on this exam, then this is my major. It's kind of a weird like let's just flip the coin and see what happens here, and clearly, I did well on the exam. It's like this was what I do, and I loved the major, right? Because it kept me in the School of Arts and Sciences, a liberal arts education, but then it allowed me to really understand the foundational elements. And there's also a lot of mathematics, which I enjoyed as well, but with a business slant to it. And then computer science was something where I took, keep in mind, this is, 1995, 1994, 95, the internet's just really kind of coming to birth. I took a computers and management class from the professor named Jim Gibbs in the computer science department. And he wrote on one of my exams, like, come see me after class. And he's like, you look like you like this. You're doing well in the class. Have you thought about computer science? I'm like, no, but tell me more. And so I ended up picking up a minor in computer science. This was also a professor who, my senior year, when I was doing my economics honors thesis, I went to go talk to him about some ideas for it. And he said, okay, great, I'll talk to you, but first things first, what are you doing next year? I'm like, I don't know. I'm probably, looking at maybe some consulting jobs. He's like, have you met with anybody yet? He's like, no. Okay, you're missing some of the interviews. Update your resume, come back with your updated resume tomorrow, and we're going to talk through it. And like, he got me kind of more into the cycle of the type of jobs that I was interested in. I wasn't in business school, so I was missing a bunch of the opportunities there. And then, he had a big influence in terms of helping me kind of think about, all right, what's really important. And it was a, great guy.
Oh my God, that's such a powerful like person like that to have that influence and a great advisor. So
Yeah.
you went on to Deloitte. What were you working on there?
Yeah, so at Deloitte, there were business analysts and there were systems analysts, right? And I think honestly, these analyst programs are amazing in the sense that they bring a bunch of young folks together. You have a community, which I think when you see a lot of folks coming through the pandemic and working from home, I think you miss a lot of that. And I think it's a really special environment. And then you get this young talent to work their ass off for a few years, right? And I came in as a business analyst, even though I had the technical background. And I did a bunch of work in the supply chain and manufacturing and retail space. The whole program there is they just get you ready to go to business school. They basically kick you out to go to business school and then want you to come back, which is what ended up for a number of different reasons, which we can get to in a second, is what happened with me. But I had a great experience at Deloitte.
Okay, but it's then you went to B school at HBS and you had an internship that I was like, what? You interned at Real Networks and like I was a user of the Real Jukebox, like totally like that was, Web 1.0 streaming of music and uploading my CDs,
Totally ripping them, yeah, and
ripping them, yes.
then sharing them peer to peer. Yeah, so I love music, like a lot of people. I wish I was a musician. I have a guitar. I play it occasionally. I'm terrible, but I feel like I would be a good music historian. And I wanted to do something music and technology related. So, a lot of people, not everybody remembers Real Networks, but they were the first like streaming, the Real Player, Real One, one of the first real subscription music services before Spotify, Rhapsody. And so I was the product manager for Real Jukebox, right during the Napster craze, and it was an absolute blast. I had a great summer out in Seattle. I mean, Seattle in June, July, and August is heaven, absolutely in the Pacific Northwest. And then I had an offer to come back full time, and the dot-com bubble burst. And I still had the offer, and I could have gone. My wife, my girlfriend at the time, while I was finishing up HBS, was going into her second year at Sloan at MIT. So she was going to be in Boston. And it just made a lot more sense as a bunch of my classmates were having offers rescinded from them because of the economic turmoil that was going on in the market. And so I made the decision to go back to Deloitte. They had offered, they were paying for business school. So I had the tuition reimbursement and went back there for a few years. But I loved the internship at Real Networks.
And it's so cool you're doing product management like that. It has more of an awareness of a profession, but back then, product management, that wasn't really
Yeah.
well known.
Yeah, no, not at all. And I think when I reflect on kind of that role of product management and what I've done since, I do truly believe that the role of CEO of a small company, and just in general, is really well aligned with the role of the product manager, right? Your most important job is making sure that the resources that you have that are, when they come in every morning, are they working on the most important things? Right. So when you think about like the backlog and where your engineering resources are working, are they, coming in, open up their backlog, seeing what their stories, their tasks are, and making the most efficient use of the resources? And it's the same decision as a CEO. So it was great, it was great training.
All right, so back to Deloitte, like what practice area were you focused on?
Yeah, so I was in the manufacturing practice area, and specifically, I was in the product and innovation lifecycle management. So it was basically PLM, but it was thinking about like product innovation, product development, with so some leanings toward the technology behind it and kind of the burgeoning kind of PLM marketplace within that. And so it gave me, a bunch of insights into just kind of the overall value chain and supply chain, and then some of the supporting technologies, and began working with a couple of companies, smaller technology companies that Deloitte was working with at the time. And really I knew I wasn't going to be at Deloitte long term. I didn't loved the experience, but didn't want to be a consultant. I wanted to really own something. I didn't want to come in for 6 months and then, leave and, hope things go well for the company. I wanted to really kind of be a part of it and own it. And the training that I got there in terms of that PLM, and that kind of led initially into my initial introduction into Endeca as well.
Perfect segue. So how did you meet Steve Papa? And this was
Yeah, so
2004, I think, right?
this
2004.
was 2004. And as I started describing to folks what I was looking for, um, in terms of what kind of company I wanted to join, five or six people were like, "Oh, you should talk to this guy named Steve Papa." And I ended up getting connected, introduced, and I think a guy that I worked for at Real Networks was a classmate of Steve's at HBS, and so he introduced me. I think he may have introduced me initially, and so I went in and I met with Steve, and the funny part was he then introduced me to Jim Baum, who was president at the time. And they began looking at me as somebody to come in to lead up the go-to-market for the manufacturing industry. Endeca was really, really good at retail, and B2C, but they wanted to build kind of a B2B in manufacturing and using kind of the guided navigation capability for use cases like an engineer looking for parts to put into a design for parts reuse. And so Steve's like, "Oh, talk to this guy, Jim Baum." Now, I didn't do my research beforehand around Jim. I did around Steve and the company. And so I'm sitting with Jim for about an hour, and Jim is asking me about my experience. He's asking all these questions about the PLM industry and the different players, and where I see the opportunity for Endeca. And then finally, I asked him, like, "So Jim, what's your, what's your background? You mind telling me a little bit of kind of how you came here?" He's like, "Yeah, I was the general manager for Windchill, the PLM product at
Oh,
PTC."
wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So this guy basically was one of the leaders in this PLM industry, and I'm educating him on the market for like 45 minutes. I'm like, "Okay, that's interesting. How'd I do?" Right? And he's like, "No, pretty good, pretty good. Well done. Yeah, let's keep chatting." But it was one of those moments that could have gone either way.
So was that the role you came in to do?
Yeah.
Was to, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so at the point, Steve was looking to obviously expand the solution area and the market, the footprint, as we're building out a platform. And so I did that for about a year or so. And then I took over ownership of what we called industry solutions, which was we're going to have somebody running media and publishing, financial services, manufacturing, distribution, retail, obviously. And so I managed that team. It was interesting when I did that for about a year, and I spent a lot of time not out talking to customers. I spent a lot of time just building the team and growing the team. And it's interesting as a product manager how quickly you can lose touch with what the market actually needs when you're just more focused internally and actually not kind of externally out. And so, I remember coming to that realization, being like, "Okay, I need to get back out into the field and talking to customers, out with our sales team, and really understanding what customers are looking for." But we set up these different groups as almost virtual general managers, where they were they didn't have P&L responsibility, but they had a number that they were responsible for hitting. And they were the go-to people for the sales team, for the platform product management team, and they had the role of product managers as well.
Okay, so over time, and when you joined Endeca, it was like 150 people-ish, like Series
Yeah,
C, I think. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we were off to the races at that point. It was clear, like, well beyond product market fit at this point. I think, it was right around a time where like really kind of building out the platform and, starting to see the weight of some tech debt over that period and needing to do some, serious work to re-platform what we were doing. But we were, it was this really fun point in the marketplace where we had something that was super valuable to customers, particularly from a commerce perspective, that nobody else could really do, and definitely could not do at scale without like some pretty, some pretty serious errors in the product. And that ability to just, refine by attribute and do that, really quickly at scale and integrate that in with a search use case. Nobody else could do it. And so we had, over half of the top 100 internet retailers using the technology. We had Walmart, Target, Nike, Barnes and Noble, Lowe's, Home Depot. I mean, it was a really fun time. Not all of those in 2004, but definitely kind of definitely on that path. And 150, now as we're at 10 people at Cimulate, 150 feels like a huge company. But it was a good number. Like everybody knew everyone at that point. It was a really tight community.
So you eventually grew your career to VP of marketing, VP of product management. So like, how did that position evolve into leading like product?
Yeah. So there was one point. I'm not sure if I've told this story before publicly. There was one point where Steve Papa or the team brought in, like I was kind of running the industry solutions, and Steve brought in a VP of marketing where kind of the industry solutions capability fell under. And so he kind of brought in somebody new over me and my team. And I was like, okay, fine. This guy had a really good guy, had a bunch of deep experience within, high tech marketing. But I thought it was time to look around, right, and start looking for another opportunity. I think at that point I'd probably been there for, 4 or so years, and I, 3 or 4 years. And I actually just had a conversation. I, got introduced to somebody, I had a conversation, and they're like, great, let's do this. Here's an offer. I'm like, whoa, we just feels a little, this feels a little
Ooh.
fast. Yeah. But then I had a conversation with my manager, and then Steve basically calls me and he's like, hey, let's get together. And I remember I think it was either Memorial Day weekend or Labor Day weekend. And it was that Sunday. And he came out to Lexington where I was living. We met in a Starbucks for like 2.5 hours. And Steve was like, you're not leaving. I'm like, no, it's okay, Steve. It's fine. Like, it's all good. He's like, yeah, you're not leaving. And I'm like, listen, there's nothing that, you could do. I think it's just time. He's like, what would you need? And I made the mistake of saying, well, here's what I would want. But I don't think it's right for the company or whatever. He's like, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and I'm going to do these couple of other things that you didn't ask for, right? We're at a really interesting time, and I think you should stick around. I think it'd be a mistake for you to leave, personally, for your career, right? And for Endeca, I would hope as well. And so I ended up staying, and was definitely the right decision. I give Steve a ton of credit for a lot of things, but certainly thankful for that. And then we moved into a commerce group and then an analytics group. We had a Latitude product that was more focused on doing kind of higher scale kind of analytics, and kind of analytics reporting and functions. And it was a very innovative product kind of on our core platform, but it was still the commerce market that I loved and that we were driving. And I led up product management and marketing for that side of the business, which was probably 90% of the business at that point, reporting into Jason Purcell, who was like the general manager of that part of the business.
Very cool. Then obviously acquisition by Oracle, and you hung out there for a couple of years, right? Before doing your own thing.
Yeah, I realized pretty early on in the acquisition process that I was going to be the guy left holding the bag. Everybody else wanted to kind of get paid out. I would have liked to have gotten paid out, got my shares forward vested, and kind of move on to the next thing and start the clock on the next thing. And I have to give it to Jason Purcell. He did an amazing job of being like, yeah, that's your guy. That's the guy. He's the guy who's running kind of a big part of the team and knows the product, today and what we're, where it needs to go. And so you should just,
There's two key pieces to this company, John and our
yeah,
fish.
yeah,
So don't screw that up.
exactly. And we screwed up one of them with Puffer,
Right, Puffer.
but did not. And then Jason, of course, went off and founded Salsify with Jeremy Redburn and Rob Gonzalez and had tremendous success there. But I basically served as his exit strategy and a few others. And what we did at Oracle is we integrated the Endeca product in with the ATG product. Oracle had acquired ATG the year before. The ATG team was at 1 Main Street in Kendall Square, and we were at 101 Main Street, which is basically the same building, just connected with a parking garage. And so we're, very close. It was a natural combination. And I ended up being kind of the most senior person left standing on the Endeca side, driving the commerce piece. And Ken Volpe was the lead at ATG and the most senior person left there. And what Oracle did is they elevated Ken to run all of the CX applications, so the customer experience applications. So Oracle Marketing, Oracle Commerce, Oracle Social, Oracle Service. And then I got elevated to run kind of the overall Oracle, the product strategy, go to market for the Oracle Commerce, product. And honestly, my time at Oracle was it was fine. I think Oracle as a application software company, it wasn't necessarily their strong suit, and they were really trying to figure that out. But my perspective was, okay, Oracle just paid over $1 billion for Endeca, right? And obviously, it's in everybody's best interest that this acquisition is successful, right? And that they look back on it and say, yeah, that was an amazing, that was a great acquisition. And so my goal then was to convince the team, like, listen, we don't need to be here forever, right? And we can, we can figure out kind of longer term what makes sense. But we're here now. Let's spend a year. Let's just start with kind of that horizon, and let's see how this beast runs, right? Let's meet some folks. Let's understand the organization, because no matter where we go next, we're probably looking to be, partnering with, competing with, or look to get acquired by a company like Oracle. And so let's just, let's make the most of it. And I think we kept a good percentage of the team around to actually do that, and spent a lot of time integrating in that commerce, the ATG and the Endeca product into a newly branded Oracle Commerce solution.
Cool. All right. So moving on to Celect. How did that come together?
So I would get the occasional call from Steve Papa, like, hey, like on a Sunday afternoon out with my family, my phone would ring and Steve saying, hey, company out in California, need a CEO. Can you move tomorrow? So, no, not really. But then he introduced me to Vivek Farias, one of the MIT professors, and it was one of those great Steve introductions that was John, Vivek, meet. That's it. And in an email. And so, hey, Vivek, great to meet you. Steve says meet. I always, whenever Steve, says meet, then I know it's going to be something interesting. So let's meet. And we meet. And we're like, okay. And Vivek was like, why are we meeting again? We met at MIT and started talking for a bit. He then introduced me to Devabrat, who was his co-founder at Celect, and they basically had collaborated on a line of research for the better part of a decade, and they were looking to commercialize it. It started this company, and they are, effectively looking for somebody to run the company. And it was super early on for them. I think they had they'd hired a business development guy to go out and try to get some early kind of design partner customers, and they had two developers, two engineers who were right out of college, and actually these twins who were amazing guys, amazing developers. But that was it. And so I was joining on as CEO as employee 5. So not a co-founder, but pretty early, pretty early on, to the point where when I was making this decision, my wife called a family meeting, and it was like, I'm not sleeping well. Well, you have a VP role at Oracle. The company's doing well. And you're going to go to a 5-person startup. What are you doing? And I ended up, I was like, okay, all right, good to know. Our risk profiles are a little bit different, from a career perspective, but it's actually worked out really well for us, because she was a biology major at Harvard undergrad. She went to MIT Sloan for MBA, super smart, talented woman. And she's in retail as well. She's a VP of merchandising at TJX now, specifically home goods. And she's always been the one who's got, she's got the big company, stable, nice paycheck, crushing it there, loves her job. And I'm the one that just goes out and I just start swinging, right? I take more of the risk, and it's worked out for us in terms of what we've kind of been able to do together. But at the family meeting, I was like, listen, I'm going to leave Oracle, right? It's time. I've done 2.5 years. I've done my time there. But now let's talk about where we're going to go. And what that looks like. And we talked through it. There were a few other folks who in my network who I had talked to about the opportunity, and who Maria respected, who were like, no, these MIT guys are the real deal. This technology is pretty interesting, and yeah, you should totally do that. And she got comfortable with it, and so in August of 2014, that's when I joined on. That's when I joined on with Celect.
Well, I think the other interesting dynamic is your wife could understand the use case of what you were aiming to do with Select.
Yeah, yeah. She could. It's funny, when I had started up, and we were thinking of some of like just the overall messaging, and I remember lying in bed. I think we're both reading or whatever, and just the mind is it's constantly, it's the fun part of the startup. No matter what, the mind's constantly going about kind of the next thing, and all the things you need to do to make the company successful. I remember leaning over to me like, so what do you think about the tagline, bringing science to the art of retail? And she was like, yeah, we totally think of it as an art. And there's not a lot of science to it, unfortunately, right now. In fact, sometimes the science is frowned upon, because you got to have this gut instinct, like kind of the Mickey Drexler merchant prince. Like, no, I'm at Fashion Week. I know what the trends are. And so, you can't bring too much data into that. That was changing, right? But it was honestly going to be a little bit of an uphill battle there. But she was having the core persona that I was selling to sitting there next to me was actually pretty helpful.
I hope you are enjoying this interview. Just a brief word from our sponsor. As a longtime champion in the local startup ecosystem, Silicon Valley Bank supports innovative companies with the solutions and financing they need through every stage of growth. With more than 1,500 bankers and relationship advisors and $42 billion in loans through Q2 2024, SVB delivers the right people, service, and resources to support your entire financial journey. Learn more at svb.com. All right, so this is 2014, and everybody's talking about AI. We started our conversation talking about AI. This was machine learning AI then.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
your co-founders were working on this for years already.
Yeah. They were, and like honestly, to I got super lucky meeting Vivek and Deborah, right? Like two very, very smart guys, clear leaders in their field, and very, very well respected. The underlying technology that we were commercializing and that we then had, the IP that we then licensed from MIT to be kind of the foundation of the company was marked as one of the top 50 innovations ever to come out of MIT. This is along with like the internet, right? And like a bunch of other like just ridiculous technologies. And so, I've been in technology and I'm a product manager. I'm not the guy who's going to come up with the groundbreaking technology, right? I need to partner with somebody who's kind of got that mind and that idea, can kind of bring really, really innovative technology to the table. And then, okay, let's now figure out what the market opportunity is. Where do we point this at? How do we grow? Like, what are the steps now to grow the technology in the company? And these guys were absolutely kind of just amazing at on the innovation side of what we were doing.
Because from what I remember, like, so in the past, retailers would
Yeah.
use like spreadsheets and just trust their gut of, well, we're going to need this number of this type of sweater in our stores. And like, it's just shocking to hear that's how they would kind of figure out inventory and how much
Yeah.
to have in each store. That's just shocking.
And it was like, how much did we sell last year? And, let's maybe think, I don't know, maybe we can do 7% more. So you just, in the spreadsheet, you just pull it from last year to this year and you multiply it by, 0.07%. And that was your plan for the next year. Now, you sold a certain amount last year, but it was in certain locations. It wasn't exactly the same thing, perhaps, as what you're looking at, like the sweater or the shirt. It's not going to be exactly the same. Maybe you had 10,000 of them and you sold all 10,000 of them, right? But maybe you could have sold 20,000 or 100,000 of them, right? You don't know that. And you got to remember, you asked about like AI, machine learning, right? This was in the period just kind of where everybody was talking about big data, right? Like big data. We can now handle a lot of data. We've got all this data. Data is the fuel to AI, machine learning, right? And we were then taking kind of the infrastructure that was enabling this big data to be able to run these algorithms that could handle very sparse data, but a lot of it in terms of understanding like, okay, what can we predict now in terms of, where the market's going in terms of what people's preferences are. And one of the core elements of what they had figured out, aside from this like tensor completion idea of handling, like being able to predict with very sparse data, was this idea of choice modeling and the understanding customer choice to be able to identify not necessarily just what somebody bought, but what were their options when they made that selection, right? What were the choices that were in front of them? And that's where Celect came from. Then Deborah came up with the name. It was a customer election kind of idea, right? Where you had this natural experiment going on where every customer was choosing a product based on a somewhat unique assortment, because every store had different items, every search results page might have different items you were looking at, and being able to use that to truly understand customer choice, and then put the optimization on top of that to say, okay, now going forward, how should we optimize the assortment based on that, was what we were really good at.
And like how did the business start to come together? There's great technology, there's a lot here, but how do you get a retailer like a Neiman Marcus or Urban Outfitters to say, yes, we're going to trust this startup to do what we need it to do?
Yeah. So, I mean, you start to try to get the word out there, right? You meet with whoever you can, and you try to find some of those early adopter customers. We had an early customer called Bonton. It was the Bonton stores. It was a department store based out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and they were willing to kind of go on a journey with us around this idea of assortment optimization, right? Help us figure out what's going to sell best and help us kind of define. And that was kind of that early customer that really was. Now, as a business, department stores were like really struggling. This was also at a point where everybody's saying like, hey, retail is dead, stores are dead. A lot of stores were closing. So not the great time to start a business in this space, but the idea, it is actually what everybody was looking for, right? To help make better decisions in that assortment. We then got, and I remember this vividly, out to dinner with my family and my wife's sister and her family. And I got a LinkedIn request from a guy named Dave Hayne at Urban Outfitters. He's the Dick Hayne's son. A guy
Wait, the son of the founder of Urban Outfitters sent you a LinkedIn request? Okay.
Yeah, because they had met with a guy named John Mays, who was at Kurt Salmon at the time, and we had briefed them on what we were doing. They're like, "Hey, this is really interesting. We need something like this in the market." They had mentioned it in a meeting with like, "Hey, here's what we're seeing in the marketplace." And John Devine, who is the CIO, and Dave Hayne were like, "Yeah, that looks super interesting." And so he just reached out, and so. One of our early customers was Urban Outfitters, Anthropology, Free People, and they really partnered. They really partnered with us early on, and I think we provided a bunch of value there, and they were just good people to work with, kind of through that journey. But and we learned, and then we expanded from there. We were very much focused on the early part of the merchandising and planning phase around assortment optimization. What should the shape of the assortment look like? The breadth and depth, how many of these shirts versus hoodies versus, running shorts or jeans, because you only have so much money to spend. We then kind of moved into the allocation space. It's like, okay, now we've got this product coming in. Where do we allocate it to into the stores? How do we replenish it based on understanding localized demand? We then moved into markdown optimization, which is, okay, now if you have a 12-week selling period for this shirt, where you want it on the shelf for a particular season, we can tell you in week 1 or 2 how well this is going to sell. So if it's not going to sell very well, you better start marking it down a little earlier so you don't take a bath on it on week 11 when you're like, oh boy, we have too much of this. And then finally was fulfillment optimization. So a lot of folks at this point were doing ship from store. And so when an online order comes in, where do we ship a product from, right? Is it a store? Is it a distribution center? Because you don't want to pull it out of a store where it might sell in that store in the next couple of weeks. Or if you have way too much of it in that store, get it out of that store, ship it from that store. And all of these capabilities, like the key insight for us was all these capabilities required a really strong prediction, an accurate prediction of localized demand, and then high scale optimization capabilities, right? To optimize. Like we have constraints. We can only put so much products within a store, right? We can only have so much products within certain, within certain stores and fulfillment centers. And so we actually built out a really nice flow from that assortment optimization, allocation, markdown, fulfillment optimization. But we were not the operational layer. We were that machine learning layer. We were that analytics kind of algorithmic layer, almost the brain providing insights into the merchant and the planners and the supply chain folks as they were making those decisions.
I have a random industry question.
Yeah, go for it.
So when you go to the week 11 in the back of the store where it's the clearance section and they're selling it, it was a $80 sweater. Now it's like $10, $5. Are they still making a margin profit on that? Or is it like, what, we're just taking the loss? Or like when do they, I'm like, when are they losing money on these items?
Yeah, no, I mean, if it's down from 80 to 5, like they're losing money on that. They're just trying to get it out, right? They just want to move it. And this is where my wife's company, TJX, provides a service to the industry, which is giving outlets to flush excess inventory. And there's a whole kind of, there's a whole discipline around how do you manage kind of end of life and of that inventory, right? Some of the high-end folks burn their inventory, which is unfortunate, but that's just, they don't want it out in the market. They certainly don't want it at, Burlington or Burlington Coat or TJX. But being able to manage so that you minimize the amount of inventory at excessive markdown is one of the key metrics. And so one of the key metrics we were always held against was, or held up to, was full price sell-through. So how much of our product are we selling at or near full price?
All right, so you went on to raise 3 rounds of venture capital funding. What was that process like, especially like the Series A, where you're a first-time CEO in a startup?
So the Series A was interesting because Vivek and Devagrat, as I was talking to them, they started talking to a few investors, and I was still at Oracle, and I was waiting for a cliff of stock to hit to then kind of join on. But I was comfortable with them presenting. So basically, what was happening is they would meet with somebody, and in part of their pitch is saying, this is what we're doing, and we're bringing in a CEO. He's still at Oracle, but here's the guy. Keep this confidential. And then I would meet with the team. I would meet with the investor kind of one-on-one. It was kind of this like this interview, this kind of cross interview. I was looking in terms of, as a company, is this an investor that we would want to work with and we'd want to bring in? And they were looking at me, it's like, if I want to invest in this company, these two really smart MIT guys, is this the guy that I want paired with them as well to then kind of run the company? So it was kind of interesting in that regard. But I joined on basically right when we closed, like right in parallels, we closed the Series A. So then I did all of the legal and administrative work to kind of get all of that kind of structured. And it was a fun experience. And having a network of folks that you can kind of call on who have done it before, and get advice from is honestly is just invaluable. This also kind of leads back to the kind of the Endeca diaspora and that Endeca network, where particularly as the CEO, where a lot of people say, oh, it's a lonely job, it's tough. Like there are certain things that you don't feel comfortable going to, the team, your management team, your investors, whoever, board members. There were a group of us, in particular, Chris Comparato from Toast and Jason Purcell from Salsify. We would get together for dinner once a quarter, and just anything was on the table. And we'd bring kind of other folks kind of into the mix as well, other CEOs. And it's just having that network of folks to be able to pull on, particularly as a first-time founder. And to your question around the doing that investment was really helpful.
All right, fast forward, you build a company and then acquisition by Nike. How did that come together?
So Nike, we were talking to them about licensing our technology, and then the corporate development team reached out. I got introduced to them, and pretty quickly the corp dev team shut down the active sales processes that we had going on within Nike, and they basically came and said, "Listen, we want to be a more direct to consumer retailer, right? Historically, they come up with an assortment, they design an assortment, they then present that assortment to Dick's and Foot Locker and Nordstrom. They say, I want this, this, and this." And then they pay them for it, and Nike goes off, manufactures it, and then delivers it to them. It was actually really good, this futures business, wholesale business. But they wanted the margins and have a direct-to-consumer relationship. In order to do that, you needed to be able to understand, like their only signal was, what does Dick's want? Before. Now they need to understand, what does Keith want and what does John want 9 months from now? So they needed to predict localized demand at a much more granular level, and that's where we came in. And they had looked at, in their telling of it, they had looked at 40 different companies that were doing something kind of similar to this in the general area, and they're like, nope, you guys are the ones that we want. We're now only talking to you. And I'm like, great, you can license the technology. It'd be awesome. You'll be our most favorite customer. And they're like, yeah, no, we're gonna buy you. We're not for sale. They laughed. And they're like, yeah, everybody's for sale, for a price. It's like, listen, we just raised a Series C with investors that are super excited about what we're building, and the company's doing great. They're like, yeah, we're going to make those investors happy. Like for 9 months of an investment, they're going to get a really, really good return. So don't worry about it. I was like, okay. So we had the conversation, and you got to remember the company was founded by the two MIT professors who had been at this for a while with their research, and this was a really interesting marriage with a pretty amazing brand. And so we started down the journey. And I got to say, the Nike Corp Dev team was just amazing to work with. They were like always above board, never played games, great ambassadors of Nike and the brand, and just kind of felt like we had a really good relationship going through and got a really nice deal done.
That's awesome. All right, so what's post-acquisition like? So, you're used to building a product that's being sold. Now this
Yeah.
is in-house to Nike, so that's a different dynamic.
Yeah, and honestly, that was probably the most difficult decision for us, which was, do we sell to like an Oracle again and kind of keep selling the product, or Nike just wanted us for themselves and they were willing to pay for it. And honestly, I think one of the big things for us was in terms of scaling the company, which we were scaling it. It was just a little slower than we would have liked because every customer wanted data science as a service. They wanted their own data science team on staff, basically full time, helping them with this. And that's hard to scale, right? That's more of a services company. We were building a SaaS subscription model software company. But once we got into Nike, I think the one of the things we did really well was in any acquisition, you have to balance keeping the team together and feeling a community, kind of continue community with that team, and then also integrating the team into the broader organization and not having it just be off on an island. And so what we did was we created what we called Lab 222. It was the name we gave to the branding to the former Celect team. I was GM for Lab 222. I still, stayed in Boston and still managed that team and the community in Boston of that team. But in terms of a solid line reporting relationship, we had the teams report up through the data science team, the engineering team, and a couple of other organizations within Nike. And then I took on VP of product management role within the DSM organization, the demand and supply management, reporting to a woman named Amy White at Nike. And so some of my peers within the organization were the ones who had the direct reporting relationship, a guy named Drew Carpenter at Nike, who was a great partner in all of this. And within after 3 years, we brought 50 people from Celect into Nike. After 3 years, we had 47 still on the team.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
So yeah, we from a retention, and we just kind of kept people excited about what they were working on. And Nike treated us really well.
It was the free Jordans too that kept the employees too.
And the
Kidding, kidding.
employee discount did not hurt. Did not
All
hurt.
right. So what led you down the path of, okay, let's do another startup. So what are you working on now?
Yeah, so for me to stay at Nike would have been a career change for me, right? I'm the technology company growth, startup growth person, and so Vivek and I had been talking for a while, and a few years ago, probably a year or so before I left Nike, he's educating me on this new technology, these kind of transformer models coming out of Google. And some really interesting technology there and what's possible. This is before ChatGPT 3.5 comes out.
Okay.
And it like blows up in the public consciousness of like, wow, this stuff is amazing. Generative AI, generative AI, generative AI. This is prior to that. And we started building this kind of customer behavior model that was using these transformer models to understand kind of the customer journey. If you think about ChatGPT is basically a sequence model that's doing next best word. We started using kind of that same core technology to understand the customer journey and do next best action, right? What are we likely to think a customer is going to do next based on this prompt of understanding everything that they've done in the past and the context of the technology in front of them. Or the products in front of them. And so we got excited about the idea. We actually started talking to a couple of investors pretty early on, and then I left Nike, and we started Cimulate. We had brought in a couple of early employees after they had actually left after they had left Nike. Um, yeah, here we are a year and a half later. We raised a $5 million Series Seed back in June of 23, right when we were kicking off. And about a month ago, we closed on a $28 million Series A round. So we
Phenomenal.
are,
Okay, off to the races now. Let's go.
yeah. Breaking news. You heard it here first with VentureFizz and Keith
Well,
Klein.
I was wondering, I'm like, the timelines, I'm like, he's got to be raising, but
Totally. So our whole goal in the first year was to build a platform, find product market fit, get some early adopter customers who were willing to work with us and go on the journey, go on that journey with us, and get them live and get metrics about how well the technology works for them. And we have 5 early customers where we've been doing that. We've been successful at that. And honestly, with a couple of them that are using our full platform, the numbers that they're seeing from a conversion perspective are honestly wildly exceeding what I was expecting, even. And it just
so
shows sorry, go
let's
ahead.
talk through the use, like the use
Yeah,
case of what the
yeah,
consumer journey looks like.
totally. So, ironically, given my time at Endeca and like really kind of going after search and like Endeca, as we were acquired by Oracle, Lucene and Solar and open source options were beginning to, kind of really take some market share. And it's like, okay, that's more commoditized at this point, and it's going to go more an open source route. Um, I thought search was a solved problem. It's not a solved problem. Like that experience of being able to query and find kind of what you're looking for, nobody's happy with it, right? There's a ton of upside there. And this technology, these large language models that understand that it basically sucked up a bunch of information and understand customer intent and understand information about these products in a way that just wasn't possible before with keyword search or vector search, which is what people call AI search now. It's what Algolia, one of the current companies, the legacy companies, is very much keyword search focused. A company like Constructor is very much the AI search, but it's more vector search. We believe very strongly that the future is a large language model driving that experience, and we've built what we call Customer GPT. It's a generative pre-trained transformer model that can understand the context of a customer and kind of the intent of what they're looking for, as well as knowing a lot of information about their particular type of products. And you can query this and have a conversation, right? And the other upside of this technology is it can be conversational, right? The idea of saying, rather than just saying like black crew neck sweater or shirt, you can say, like, hey, I really like the Lululemon ABC pant. Do you have anything similar? Right? Or I'm going to a Taylor Swift concert. The Eras tour. What should I wear? Like you can start to do like a
That's
lot more.
amazing.
You can do a lot more interesting things. And so this is where I think it's going to be a really interesting next couple of years because everybody is going to have to re-platform their stack to leverage, whether it's Cimulate or not. But I think we're in a really interesting position to be able to capitalize against that over the next couple of years. And with this raise, Spark Capital led the round. Alex Finkelstein at Spark is on our board now, and they've along with some other great investors and our seed investors at Pillar and Sierra, we're set up with $28 million in the bank to really kind of go after this because we also think time is of the essence. The time is now to kind of capitalize on this opportunity. So
Well, when we started the conversation, I said, I'm excited about what's going on in Boston now. And what you just said is exactly why. And I love hearing Spark because Spark, they invested in 7AI. Lior Divs, he was Cyber Reason. Now he's doing his next, AI version of, cybersecurity and their
Yeah.
lead investor. And I love how I'm hearing Spark as, they're just such a pillar VC firm. And to hear them backing these repeat founders in Boston, I'm just really, really excited about what's going to happen.
And we love having, so Jamie Goldstein at Pillar was in our seed round, has been amazing for us. Alex now. And so we love having that Boston connection. We also have got a few folks out in the West Coast, and staying connected to what's going on in the Valley, I also think is really important. We're not moving the company to the Valley. We're staying in Boston. But we've got LFX Ventures, Commerce Ventures, and then Tim Galeri from Sierra Ventures led our seed. So like we have some good connections out there as well. And I feel like we're in a good position. But I love having that Boston connection and some local folks as well.
It's great. All right. So looking ahead, like what's the plan as far as growing the team or
Yeah,
what do you expect? Just,
we're gonna grow the team. We have to grow the team.
yeah.
And data science and engineering are at the heart of kind of what we need to build in terms of, around the product. We have an office in Boston in the downtown Crossing area. We're looking to have folks come into, we want folks to be together and be there. So, not everybody is here in Boston. We're not, completely militant about that, but we are very much trying to kind of keep and grow kind of the office and the community here in Boston. We'll also are hiring go-to-market folks, right? A head of sales, a head of pre-sales, and customer success. We'll be looking at some marketing folks in the near term. So we are hiring. So we're getting after it.
Nice. Awesome. All right. Biggest lessons learned as a, multi-time CEO now.
Yeah, good question. I think this is a little rote, but the team, like actually, and I learned this from Steve, right? He brought really good people together. And I think a big part of that is I also love the athlete kind of over the specialist, especially early on, right? As you grow, you need more specialists and folks who've done kind of the same thing for a while. But love kind of growing the team with like really good athletes who you can throw anything at them and they're going to figure it out. I also, I think the other thing is just kind of building a community, right? And having people be really excited about what we're doing and then maintaining that community. People want community. People want to be part of something. They want to be in the trenches, kind of fighting for, together and building those. It's not always easy, but when it's hard, you're doing it together and you're figuring it out. About 9 months ago, we actually did for Celect, the last company, we did a reunion. And we brought together here in Boston, sent out the call. And I think at our height, we had about 70 people. And 45 people came to this reunion. Some people
Wow.
flew in to Boston simply for it, right?
That's
And so I
great.
think it's really important to kind of build out that community and have people feel like they're part of something special. And similar to Endeca, if an Endeca person calls me, I'm going to help them. If a Select person calls me, I'm going to help them, right? And I'm going to do anything anything I can. The other final thing I'll say is just as the startup founder, there's a lot of highs and lows, and you can't let either of them get you too high or too low, right? You need to be able to kind of go forward with the punches. Every deal is not the make or break moment for the company. They're all important, but you just gotta kind of like, no, we know what our strategy, our plan is, and let's execute against it.
All right. 3 apps you can't live without.
Yeah. So this is a little boring, but one is Quicken. Um,
Quick, that hasn't been said
Quicken.
yet.
It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But since August of 2000, I have categorized every transaction I've made. I've integrated in with my bank account, with my credit card. So when I buy a coffee, it's categorized as coffee. And I can tell you how much I've spent on coffee for the past 25 years. My wife, and so now my wife says, like, hey, how much did we spend on window treatments in our house in 2007? And I can tell her exactly. And I just like having visibility. It takes me 10 minutes a week. And I just like having that visibility and just understanding like what we're doing and where we're spending. So that, but that just kind of goes more to my obsessive compulsive behavior. I think another one is the New York Times Games app. I just love kind of going in and just when I have a few minutes, I'm not always kind of flipping through Twitter or X or TikTok. I actually like doing the crossword puzzles and Wordle with my, family and friends. And so that's fun. And then the third one is Spotify. And it kind of goes back to my real networks time and just love of music and all the features and functionality about music discovery and just how everything's accessible within there. I think they've built a really good product and service there.
So when we started the conversation, you were talking about your love of music. I would have been disappointed if Spotify wasn't one of the top three. And
Awesome.
another thing that makes me like amazingly proud of Boston is the personalization's gotten so good, the recommendations gotten
Yeah.
so good, and it's largely based on their acquisition of the Echo Nest in Boston. So,
Right. Right.
MIT, like I mean, like that
And
Spotify
and
wouldn't.
there's an Endeca guy, Eli, there as well.
Yeah, Eli Daniel is there for a good stretch. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
he's over
yeah.
at Jellyfish now.
Yes,
Um,
it is another
another
great Endeca.
Andrew Lau, another
Great
great,
in
great.
Gorley. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, podcast or book recommendation for entrepreneurs.
So the book I always recommend to folks is the Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. If folks haven't read it, it's a great read, and it's just got so many kind of great great stories. The other the podcast this has risen in popularity significantly over the last couple of years, but Acquired.
Oh, it's
The
so good.
It's so good. They just do a really good job of diving deep and doing analysis and just thinking about kind of strategically what's works and what's worked and what hasn't. It's is it Ben and David. They do a really good job. And I find it wildly entertaining. Just kind of do a 4 hour deep dive on a company.
All right, so I got to promote 2 points that you just brought up. That is Boston promotion as well as VentureFizz. So the hard thing about hard things. My favorite thing about that book
Yeah.
is the company that Ben's Opsware was competing against was Blade Logic in Boston. They're the
Yeah.
villain.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
had Phil Pergola on the podcast, who headed up customer success, pre-sales, post-sales at Blade Logic, and he's now Cloud Zero. And the second thing about Acquired is they did a nice long form where I was just in the car and I burned through the whole thing. They did an interview with Howard Schultz from Starbucks.
Yeah.
And
I
while they're
listened to that.
talking, DJ,
Yeah.
so what I connected the dots with was like Frappuccino was created by a Boston company. The name, the trademark was a
Yeah.
Boston company, the
Yep.
coffee connection. So I had Joe Caruso on the podcast, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden I was doing my research on him. I'm like, wait a second, he was on the board of the coffee connection. I got to talk to him about this Frappuccino thing. So, anyways, we talk about that in that episode too. So, all these fun facts I pick up in these
Yeah.
conversations. It's just fun.
I assumed VentureFizz podcast was just by default as something that people need to listen to, which is why I didn't bring it up as one of mine. So
Well, of course, that goes without saying. Outside of
yeah.
work, what do you like to do for fun?
Soccer. I love sport, like running but soccer is the thing that I do. I've gotten super involved. Like I still play old man soccer.
Good.
Our team just won the championship this past year, and we're all kind of
Nice.
like little kids about it, which is when we got a trophy, which was awesome.
That's
I
awesome.
was coached my daughter. I was president of the Lexington United Soccer Club here in Lexington, the youth soccer. So that's where I spend my time outside of work and family. And just still love it. It's getting harder as my body's breaking down more, but whatever. It is what it is.
Well, John, thanks so much for taking the time to walk us through your background story. Obviously, all the great stories from each company. And obviously, I'm really excited about Cimulate and what you guys are going to build.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. It was great to catch up, and thanks for all you do with bringing these stories to light. I've really enjoyed listening to it, and also within the Boston community. So.